All right, it's 5:50. Call the Finance Committee to order. The chairman's not here tonight. He asked me to fill in. First item on the agenda is to discuss some ARP options and funds and capital projects review. And I think Samantha's got some information on that.
I talked with Everett a little bit earlier, and he just wanted to explain that the ARP money is in the general fund. It's in its own bank account, but he is suggesting that we set it up in the budget, kind of like our functions or our department, so it can be clearly accounted for. We can see it. It's just there in black and white. It's not hidden in the general fund in the big scheme of everything. Just to allow for the clear reporting. And then whenever the board decides to use some of that money for whatever they decide to use it for, you clearly see it come right out of that account, right out of that budget line, and go to whichever department, whichever project, whatever it needs to be used for. The other thing he asked me to speak on is the capital budget. So this year would be our first year of a quote capital budget, and it will be presented tomorrow.
They said that they wanted it spent for only capital stuff. And then it never was spent, separate or anything. And then later it was included just in the general fund because we had to start using some of that money to cover general fund expenses.
Yeah, there was no
No.
legal compunction on
No.
the city to put it in a quote unquote segregated account like an enterprise fund.
No, but now this money is separate. It has to be put in a separate bank account, which we did whenever we got the money. It's in its own separate bank account now.
So is it what you would refer to as a segregated account?
Well, I guess you'd call it that, yes.
It's in its own bank
Bank
account,
account.
just under the umbrella of the general fund.
Mhm.
So we realize it is revenue within the general fund, and you're seeing it in your unassigned fund balance. It's kind of driven that up on our monthly reports compared to last year, the year before. So just to be clear moving forward on the accounting side of what that money is being used for as the board decides what it's used for.
Anything it's used for will have to be paid out of that separate bank account so that you can properly report.
Account for it.
Yeah,
If I remember right, there was actually a vote to approve use of the county tax money in the general fund,
yes. there
just
was,
generally.
yes.
And that was relatively recently,
Well,
I think.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the outset, it was discussed as being segregated from the general fund, but
Right.
I don't know that there was ever any legal undertaking
No.
or action by the board. But I do remember your comment
We
about the
repealed it.
board merging it with the general fund.
Yeah.
There isn't any action to be taken or anything, just a summary of what the funds were and where they're at.
So it
To be
seems
clear-
like, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna be clear, which funds are we talking about?
The American Rescue Plan, the ARP funds.
Have
The-
we not declared that we've used those already?
We have, they're still there. They are not, they haven't been designated to be used for anything in particular. I don't know the correct word to,
So we were required to provide proof that we spent at least the amount of money that we were getting in ARP funding. Our budget is $25 million. We're getting 4 point some million. So we had to provide proof that we spent 4 point whatever million. So I provided proof that we did that.
So if we've already done that,
That just released the money to us to use however we wish.
Just for paperwork process.
That's right.
You have to show that
But
we
to
spent
your-
that amount.
To your point, if we've already spent it, then what's the point of taking it out of the general fund? That's what he's saying, which I kind of,
That's not the case. We had to prove that we spent $4 million at least. And then we could get our $4 million from the ARP money. It's not, I could have chosen any
Yeah.
amount that added up to, or any part of the budget that added up to $4 million. I chose the police and fire budgets because they're the largest, and together they equaled $5 million. So I submitted that, and they said, you're good to go. Your money is released. First half anyways.
I'm still not quite sure why it has to be, we've already provided what we've used it for. So why we have to document where the rest, because that $4 million is now coming back in, and we've already told them what we spent it on. So tracking that money now is, I think, irrelevant.
Well, it is relevant because you don't want to spend the money on recurring expenses.
I agree.
So you want to track that you're using it for one-time expenses such as you would in a capital budget. So
I think
that's the purpose of it.
it seems as much as anything that every time we look at the general fund balance, we don't have to say
$2 million.
asterisk, there's $2 million in there that came from the ARP money. Keep that
Yes.
in mind.
Yeah, don't
So-
forget, take this
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's a way of being very clear about it.
because I mean, accounting, I mean, it's easy for you to keep up with. I mean, that's no problem. You know what's in there. I mean, that's simple compared to other things that you do. But it's just every time we look at that balance, we're gonna think we got more money than the same way we always get it than we do. And, you know, like, we may forget or not, or just not realize that that's a big chunk of that could be that much. So.
Yeah, and I
guess
feel like
that's-
anytime we get a giant sum of money like that, we need to keep track of how we're spending it.
So that money is going to be in a segregated fund,
It will be within the general fund.
but it'll be a segregated line item.
Yes.
Its own object.
Its own function, which is kind of
Function.
like your general government admin is a function, police is a function, fire is a function. We could establish an ARP fund function to help, instead of it getting bogged down in all of the revenue and the expenditures inside of the general fund, we can clearly see it subset off of that, and we can see what our balances are. We know what money has gone out. As the board says, we're investing X amount in this project. We're going to use ARP funds for that money. We know it's not reoccurring funds. We know it's not an operating expenditure. That's what that money is going to go for. And we could see that 4 million go down to as we use it.
We
So
set it up as a separate budget, just like police department budget. we have a
Correct.
Separate budget.
And we're doing that for our purposes, not for reporting purposes back to the
Correct.
federal government.
Just for transparency, and everyone knows that that money is there, but it's not going to, we shouldn't count on that revenue. So let's take it out of the revenue of the general operating.
Thank you for clarification.
Ready? Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is discuss the treasurer compensation. And I guess that would come to Libby.
So I sent an email to Everett, to Steve, and to Zach. Are there any questions or concerns? So what I sent you was kind of an overview of directors in general, so you had a data point. And then a recommendation to a starting salary. I also included the median and what the range is under the new pay scale, if we implement that. Do you guys need another copy?
I don't have mine with me. I don't remember the number to the exact penny, but I mean,
Mhm.
yeah.
So
fine with it.
the proposed salary is 83,554, which is in line with the other directors that are newly appointed. Do you want a copy, Zach? I have a hard copy.
Sure,
Squint.
you got a copy.
Your squints, let me,
Maybe do you have an extra copy? for my notes?
I do.
Might as well, since you got it.
So the, we're in the middle of this transition with the implementing the compensation study. So would this number be consistent with the proposed initial step rate?
It will. So if you look at Parks and Rec or Public Works, you'll see the 83. That green column, that is what it would equate to on the new pay scale. So that's what they proposed.
I'll be right with you.
So still within range, low for that. But we're on our old pay scale because we haven't adopted the new pay scale. I just noted that for reference. So until we adopt the new pay scale, we have to remain within what we have currently adopted. And the 83,554 is within that. Our ranges are very wide. So a lot of our employees will show under market because we have 20 something steps. And you'll see that in the presentation later. They've shortened the steps so that there's not as much of a range. So we don't run into hiring individuals under the market minimum.
But the 83,554 is what you're recommending.
Yes.
Yeah, she's on the Zoom.
Oh.
Any more questions? We have a recommendation for that amount. I hear a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. You got anything else?
No, but I do believe that has to go to the full board.
I would recommend it.
Yes.
Since it's been discussed on previous occasions, the creation.
Oh. What's your last name?
Jordan.
Jordan.
Think about this tonight if.
Oh, we can't do it
if
tonight?
It's a will of majority of the board.
Do we need to make a motion to recommend it to the board?
Yes.
So moved.
I have a motion. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
What's
Motion
David?
carries, recommend the full board salary of 83,554 for the treasurer. Nothing else, anything else before the finance committee?
How
Only
many
thing
times
I'd
do I look at?
say is there, Libby, where do we stand? Shirley, where do we stand in terms of
Well, you,
approve the position, but in
Yeah,
terms of it's a
but you were
it's
only
a
here in the
appointed position
evening.
and there's a
the first day on the
swearing
morning,
in and
Right.
both, correct?
so the same as 11 days, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That is on the agenda.
Let's see that.
Under new business, I think, or
Yeah,
unfinished business.
Day for Dennis, because he brought them.
Right.
Wednesday. So, yeah.
The last time I spoke with the mayor, he indicated that he had intended
And
to
it's 20
administer the.
or 10 of it, right?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, 20 a day.
20 a day.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Finance committee meeting is adjourned.
Okay, 220.
I just sent you, put this on your account for the medicine, so,
They send me a bill.
yeah. I was good. I gotta go home and leave my-
Thank you.
Yeah,
We
just-
really
Oh,
appreciate it.
there's no problem whatsoever. Just next time you need me, just let me know.
I will. Were they pretty good?
There was just that one day with her, I was worried about her because like she didn't finish her food. And like she was just like,
She's
the
kind of
cheese.
moody.
She was just weird. She was just like, I mean, she ate it, but it was just
Yeah.
like, what's wrong with you? But she started acting same, acting normal the next day. So maybe she just had a good mood, I guess.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Tell Sally I said hello.
Okay.
Now,
I don't know which one to come up with. Proceed.
9:30 out there.
Well, there's a 9:30 for streets and sanitation, then I had another one for 2 from previous emails. So this is, okay, so this is, so I need to set everything back to this.
They're not the same as the previous.
Well, not what we previously,
Oh,
yeah, that, I just want to know what control, you know?
water around.
It's, I believe it's I believe it's 6:20. At this time, the Water and Sewer Committee meeting will be called to order. Ricky, will you explain to us what you're needing to discuss about the roof on the main building at Bell?
Yes, as we've talked about this many a times, and back a few months ago, we had issues with the back roof leaking so bad it was coming into the electrical box in the back. We bid out and replaced the back part of that roof and the front part that covers all the offices. But recently, these last few rains that we've had, it's leaking through the main roof, which was a warehouse area. It's leaking through that, coming through the block walls. It's actually went into the maintenance supervisor's office, damaged some of his equipment, damaged some flooring in the police break room. And it's gotten into a few electrical sockets and a couple of breakers. It's on the front part of the building. But since that we're talking about budget, it's budget time, I thought it would be a good time to go ahead and get out in front of this. Let's look at bidding that roof. That's the warehouse and our workshop area. You're talking probably 38,000 square feet. It's the main part of that building. There's about 3 to 4 roofs on there now. This would be a bidding, taking all that off and replacing it back with a rubber roof. And I've got the specs that we used. They're just altered based on what the need is, the same specs that we used prior, back when we done the backside and the front offices.
Now that roof has a slope built into it already in the steel structure. So we don't need any tapered insulation on that. It'll just be 2 or 3 inches, whatever we decide is appropriate over the steel deck.
I put 2 inches in it.
Okay.
A 2-inch insulation with a 20-year roof.
Okay.
But I'll be glad to share these specs if you'd like to look at them.
We went over there several months ago after that rain, and there was something odd about that roof, and I can't recall, is that what it was? Is that it was the taper? There was
Well,
something strange about it that was,
What was what was the issue? I think you're talking about prior to us replacing the back area of the back area and the front area when we went over there. What was odd about it was the fact that the corrugated metal decking that's welded to the trusses that create the roof, and they already have pitch in them. Some of that metal is rusted through in places. So there's some unknowns as what's going to be suitable and what's not going to be suitable when that is taken off. So maybe that, Rachel, is what you're referring to.
I think it is. That was rusted, right? And then the layers and layers of roof.
It was, and the backside, like Stacy was saying, the backside, they did have to do some retro on the metal on the backside. And on the front side, they built the taper with wood.
Right. Yep.
And so,
And this would be your request is to bid the removing of all the existing material,
all existing.
replacing the metal decking that has to be replaced, and then reinstalling the main roof and then gutters around the perimeter of the building that haven't been previously replaced.
Right. And on the metal, like Stacy said, some of it's gonna have to be replaced. Some of it, I would say just looking at it and around those vents, maybe looking at 20% of that may have to be replaced. And that they can do certain. I think Watson's actually done.
Wasn't there also a possible option of doing a pitched roof on top of what's there and then metal, the roofing on top of it? There was that option. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would hold up today in the labor and materials market, particularly in the steel end of things, because it's absolutely, steel's 300% higher than it was this time last year, which is about when we were discussing this last year. So that may have been a viable alternative at one time. I kind of doubt it at this point. But we can always bid that as an option.
I think at one time we thought it might be less expensive, but it may have been,
I know that
that was a while back.
I know that Nathaniel had talked to an engineer about getting them to look at the design and the weight load on it. And then that was kind of put on the back burner. So that was the issue there about hiring an engineer to look at that.
Okay, well, I'll accept a motion to put this out for bid, re-roof, replacing re-roof of 202 Bell. Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you, sir.
I do not believe there's anything else on our agenda tonight. So at this time, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
6:40, and I'll call the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to consider purchasing a 100-gallon commercial water heater for the bathhouse at the city pool, and Justin's gonna tell us about that.
Yeah, so as you know, we had put this out for bid and got some quotes back. There were two companies and the price was pretty high. So I went back and was able to go back and look at other companies that this met the specs of the hot water heater that we had put out, and found two companies that had this hot water heater in stock, and it was half the price of what was bid out. So and then in speaking with Libby, I believe Heath and his guys will help my guys install this hot water heater if approved. So we'll do it in-house.
Is it still on the shelf? Because we've been
I believe
worried
so.
about keeping it on the shelf.
I believe so. I called yesterday and spoke to the gentleman. And yes, it was in stock as of yesterday. I did tell him that we had a meeting tonight, and if approved, we would be calling him first thing tomorrow morning to get this thing going. So 4 to 5 day shipment. It's coming from California. Once we get it here, we'll get it installed.
And this is the $7,674 bid.
Yes, ma'am.
And we have money for that in the budget.
Yes, ma'am.
And the other one lasted 25 years,
It was 20 years. Yes.
20 years.
Yes. It was original. So,
We're hoping we won't need another one for a long time.
right.
I'll make a motion to approve this purchase.
Have a motion,
Second.
have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion about this issue with the water heater? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Motion carries. Is there any further issues to come before this committee? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and use that is permitted via a special exception in the R5 Residential Commercial District. I believe we've allowed sufficient time for public comment. We will consider this public hearing closed.
Stacy Lee.
According to Wikipedia, Stacey Heather Lee is an American author of young adult fiction, best known for Under a Painted Sky and Outrun the Moon.
Stacy Lee, McMinnville, Tennessee.
That way, there's a bunch of them here. and that guy's out of town and everything. It is 7 o'clock. We will call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the McMinnville City Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The first item on the agenda is roll call.
All the board members are present, Mayor Chastain, except for Emmett Clark.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of minutes. Each member of the board should have received those in their agenda packet. If there be no requests for additions, corrections, or deletions, I will entertain a motion to dispense with those as read.
Motion to dispense with the minutes.
Motion by Ms. Kirby,
Second.
second by Stacy Harvey. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Item 3 is recognition of visitors. If any member of the audience wishes to address the board, please approach the podium and state your name for the record.
Hi, Stacy Lee, 120 Omni Drive. We're having a hard time hearing you guys, just so you know, because a lot of people here. Have any of you guys gone through the Citizens Police Academy here? Anybody? No? Raise your hand if you have. Anybody in the audience? Citizens Police Academy. Hey, great, I have. Have any of you guys done a ride along with the police department or the fire department? Anybody? Anybody here done one? Same people, right? Anybody here married to a police officer? No? Anybody? Couple of y'all. Great. Anybody ever go to work in an armored vest? Anybody? Raise your hand. Come on now. Some of y'all are wearing armored vests right now. Hopefully. Great. Well, I'm here to recognize the police. Obviously, the fire department's really important, but I'm married to a police officer. So it's really important to me because, every time they go to work, I got to worry about stuff. So it's been really great for my prayer life. On a typical day when police go, they don't know what they're going to deal with. They could be dealing with a squirrel in a tree, a loose dog, or a runaway kid, having to use a fire extinguisher on a car wreck, having to do CPR on somebody, maybe dealing with a fentanyl overdose, getting bit by a dog, dealing with all kinds of body fluids. So what I'm here to say is that I would like us to invest in our future of law and order and peace. The thin blue line is like the only thing that keeps us between order and chaos. We take them for granted. But if they weren't here, and if we didn't have the ones that are experienced and have the judgment to deal with, walking up to a car at night and just pulling them over to give them a ticket is a life-threatening thing. You don't know what's in that car. You don't know what they're going to do. But they're also like, they're like the janitors of the streets. They clean up stuff. They have to do counseling and therapy, and they don't get a lot of recognition. And I bet they don't get a lot of thank yous and hugs. And I don't even think we do a real police appreciation event in this town. So what I'm asking you guys to do is invest in our future going forward. If this study comes back and it looks like something that you want to do, I think it's a worthwhile investment. And I'm going to close with Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, recognition of employees. We have several department heads here this evening. If anyone wishes to give a shout out to an employee, the time is now.
So some of you may know Mr. Bob Mathis behind me. Bob was with the Water and Sewer Department for 19 years, and we were happy to bring him into our department at Community Development. His extensive experience with plumbing, which has been very helpful in the plumbing inspections that we do. But I also really wanted to recognize Bob for bringing forward a couple of issues that we are going to be enforcing a little bit more strongly in the future. And we're started discussing this with Mr. Ming, with the water sewer departments and other departments, and that is the enforcement of grease traps and backflow preventers. There's a lot that we can do in that area. Those are two things that you don't really hear on the news that often, but they are things that are critically important to health and safety in our community. And so Bob's going to be doing a lot of that for us. And so I just wanted to both recognize him and let you guys know what he's going to be doing in that capacity with us. So I wanted to say thank you to Bob, and he's been with us now for 5 weeks and he's hit the ground running. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bob.
Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, communications. We do have one item. In the packet, you should have found enclosed a letter from Ann Vance regarding the parade for seniors. This event will be held on May 22nd at 2 p.m. and a caravan of seniors with their decorated vehicles will travel from the high school down Morrison Street through Westwood, down Main Street, and end at the farmers market. Chief Mosley, have they been in contact with you all about this?
Yes, they have. We have it all around.
Okay, no issues foreseen or anything? Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion from a member of the board to approve this letter.
So moved.
Have a motion by Ms. Sally Brock,
Second.
second by Mr. Stacy Harvey. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is public hearings regarding some zoning, but given the fact that we have a large number of employees here in attendance, as well as a guest from out of town to discuss the compensation study, I would ask that the board consider amending the agenda to move discussion regarding the compensation study to now, and then we can do the public hearings and the ordinances after that.
Make a motion to change the agenda.
Have a motion by Mr. Stacy Harvey. Second by Ms. Sally Brock. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Libby?
Yes. So we have Stephen Thompson with us tonight with Burris Associates. You guys are all familiar with what we've been going through with the compensation study that has finalized. He has some results and he has a presentation that he wants to share with the board. The finance committee and a couple of you have seen it already, but we're gonna turn it over to Stephen.
Okay. Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to share the kind of an overview of the methodology and results of our pay study. If probably this works best if there's some questions that come up as I go through the presentation, it's probably best to ask them right away. Otherwise you might forget or whatever. So go ahead and keep this pretty informal. And if you have any questions, please pipe up or we can try to address those.
You might want to move the podium back to the corner by the dais so that the audience members can hear you. Which is cool.
Is this good?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay? Can you hear in the back there? Okay. All right. This is good. I can see something. All right. So go ahead. So I'll just briefly describe the methodology for the study. Maybe a little preamble would be appropriate first. My name is Steve Thompson with Burris Thompson Associates. We're a small HR consulting firm out of Nashville. 100% of our work right now is city and county government. We're working with cities and counties from Gatlinburg to Jackson and Gallatin to Hamilton County Schools. So we're pretty busy across the state, and we do a lot of city and county government. So we pretty much know what city and county government is all about. I've been doing this since 1994, and we didn't start out this way with a lot of public sector work, but that's where we are now. It's almost 100% public sector work. So I'll describe the process for the pay study, the findings. We'll go over recommendations, and we do have some numbers on cost of implementation. And if there are any other questions at the end, we can open up to a couple of questions and answers. We did anticipate a couple of questions. We'll try to answer those at the end. So go ahead. So as far as the pay study process, next slide. These are the steps we follow to complete the project. First is job analysis. The approach we take is pretty much market driven in that jobs are valued like they're valued in the marketplace. So we don't make some sort of internal comparison between jobs on know-how requirements or problem solving or accountability or working conditions. Some programs do that. I've done those, but this is strictly how jobs are valued in the marketplace. So we have to make sure we understand the jobs. To that accord, we had employees fill out questionnaires, and we had the job descriptions, met individually with each department head to go over the jobs in the area. So the result of all that was we felt we had a pretty good understanding of the jobs. So when we compare the jobs here to our databases, we feel we can make pretty apples to apples comparisons. So the second step is compiling market data. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we develop some sort of pay structure guidelines, if you will, for administering pay. And then talk about how we determined proposed employee pay adjustments. And then lastly, just briefly touch on, we haven't finished this piece, but continue to work with Libby and you all on updating the compensation administration policy. So go ahead, job analysis. I mentioned this already. Job questionnaires, focus groups. We did have a couple focus groups with employees. I get some input from them on what they like, don't like about pay administration here at the city of McMinnville. And I mentioned those department head meetings. So we felt we had a pretty good information on all the jobs and some of the issues related to pay that were concerning to employees and department heads. Compiling the market data. So we had two sources of data. One is a set of public sector benchmarks. They're represented on the screen here. We tried to select cities and some counties that represented direct labor market competitors. So they're close by. Competition for talent based on proximity. We also selected a few that are further out, trying to find cities that were comparable in terms of demographics, population mostly, but some other characteristics as well. And we came up with a set of benchmarks that seemed to be a good comparison group. And we do have Rutherford County in there, but Murfreesboro is in there. So the Middle Tennessee area is represented, but most of these are smaller cities a little bit further out. I should mention that one of the challenges that we have this time going through this process with, we're doing about 14 of these right now. So much of the market is kind of a moving target. I don't know if you've read what's going on in Murfreesboro and Smyrna and Rutherford County and some of the cities in the Nashville area. They're doing the same sort of thing, and some of them are our clients. So we're pretty much involved with all of it. But part of the response coming out of the pandemic, part of the response to we can't hire anybody, part of the response is to we're seeing these CPI numbers in the newspaper. And the upshot of it all is that we're seeing a lot of movement in the wage and salary market. Some of it isn't settled, some of it's proposed, and going through the same process with some of our clients, proposing what we think should happen to maintain competitiveness. So it's really much a moving target. So that is a bit of a challenge, but this group seemed to be a good comparison group, pulled data from all of those cities and counties. The city also competes with non-public sector employers for employment. In fact, outside of public safety, it's pretty likely that somebody who considers employment with the city of McMinnville or is already here and is considering other job options is looking at other employers, retail, manufacturing, financial institutions, contractors, whatever. So we do feel it's important to get data from the general business and industry database as well. So we have a database we subscribe to. It's updated quarterly. There's 4,000 job titles in this, and they have data representing Warren County, McMinnville area. Pretty solid database. So we use that for the general business and industry. So two sources of numbers: the public sector benchmarks, and then the general business and industry database. All those numbers were projected forward to July 1, 2022. So we determine a market rate for each job, if you will, and it's basically the average of the municipal data median rate, which is a halfway point, and the general business and industry median pay rate. So we average those two numbers together to come up with a market rate for each job. Represents somebody typically with 5 to 7 years tenure in the position. But this is the value of the job, not necessarily the person. Okay. Go ahead. So then the next step is to kind of create pay guidelines that usually take the form of pay ranges or pay steps to guide administration of pay. And then once that's set up, then we look at determining pay adjustments, determining employee pay adjustments within that structure, and then again the pay policy. Go ahead. So findings. So bottom line, I guess you could say overall salaries are about 10% below the market rates as determined through this process I just described. This graph up here is a little difficult to interpret, but if you look closely, there's a horizontal line labeled 100%. It's labeled there the market rate. That would be the market rate for all the jobs. And the blue represents employees. It kind of a cumulative total. So the vast majority of employees are below the red line. They're underwater, so to speak, below the market rates. You do see some employees on the right-hand side. We do have some that have market rates that exceed the market average, the market rate, and that's fine. Most of those are long service employees, and their salaries are above market and appropriately so. Most employers will allow pay to progress beyond the market rate for a job as much as 20% or so. Most employers do draw the line somewhere. Taxpayers are not willing to pay, above certain rates for getting the work because they can hire somebody cheaper and get the same job done. So usually that line is drawn at 120% of market. Most employers start new people below the market rate because they come in, they're not real productive. It takes them a while to learn the job. Most employers are starting new folks somewhere around 85% of market, 90%, somewhere in there. And of course, that would be minimally qualified people. Somebody who has a lot of experience would normally be brought in higher, maybe as close, maybe as far as the market average. And some exceptions, maybe sometimes above that. So anyway, so overall, about 10%, employee salaries are currently about 10% below market. Varies somewhat by department. And we'll show that in a minute here. Go ahead. So as far as recommendations, we're recommending creation of a pay structure that consists of 17 pay grades. Jobs would be assigned to one of 17 pay grades. Each pay grade has 13 annual pay steps. The spread from step 1 to step 13 is about 42.5%. That's pretty typical in the market. There's 3% difference between the steps, so the 3% steps, and from one grade to the next, it's about 11% going up from one grade to the next. Okay. Can't see this real well. If you got a handout, you can turn to that. I think it's exhibit 2, 3. We can see the proposed pay grades. The grades are listed 1 through 17 on the going vertically, and then across we have 13 pay steps. The one highlighted in yellow there, step 6, we're designating that more or less the market step, if you will. And so jobs are basically assigned to the pay grade for which the market rate most closely matches step 6. So that's how we get jobs into the pay grades. So I'll repeat that. Jobs are assigned to the pay grade 1 through 17 based on the step 6 that's closest to the market rate for the job. Okay. Describe that here. We did look at changing some job titles or looked at new job descriptions for a couple of jobs where we felt it was appropriate. So as far as salary adjustments, each employee is placed in the step closest to their current rate of pay, but not less. That's to get everybody on a step more or less. Then there's a general increase. Everybody would move 1 step 3%. And then we, to deal with pay compression and maybe one could say a poor linkage between job tenure and pay, we propose some service-based increases. One of the things we found when talking to both employees in the focus groups and department heads was the concern about pay compression, people with different amounts of tenure in position or with the city being paid about the same for the same type of work. Most people thought that was not appropriate. We should recognize service tenure to some extent. And so it made some sense for us to spread people out within the steps a little bit based on time with the city. Go ahead. So this is how we did that, created this chart. So basically anybody with less than 3 years with the city in their position, we felt it appropriate to be in step 1, that would be fine. But if they're in the position with the city 3 years, but less than 5, and they're not at step 3, we would move them to step 3. In the position 5, but less than 8 years, or tenure with the city 5, but less than 8 years. If they're not at step 4, after all these other increases, we move them to step 4, et cetera. So this would be an attempt to spread people out based on tenure to try to improve the linkage between time with the city and pay. Any questions on any of this?
So not so much. So this deals with our current employees. Will you be speaking to somebody that is hired? Is that?
So yeah, so what we recommend, always the question comes up, well, where should we start a new hire? So we usually suggest that if somebody's minimally qualified, meets the minimal qualifications for the position, they would normally start at step 1. But if you had somebody who was a vehicle mechanic for 10 years at an auto dealer, A, you're not going to get them at step 1, and B, it probably wouldn't be appropriate because it doesn't recognize their expertise, experience, et cetera. So somebody like that we would again work on this policy with the city, and some employers would allow that person to come in as high as, in this case, step 6, to recognize that prior experience. So that's a fairly typical policy. You can hire as high as the average market rate, in our case, market step being step 6. And there are sometimes exceptions with the approval of whoever you designate. You could hire in somebody who had 20 years of experience. You could hire in a little bit higher than that, but that's something we'll have to work with the city on in terms of a pay policy. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
What you're showing there, is that time with the city period, or is that time in the role that they're currently
So
acting in?
let me refresh my memory. We had data for.
You had data for time with the city.
That's right.
But not data for time in the role.
Yeah.
You compensate based on time in the role.
So yeah, typically when we do this, we base it on time in the job, but we didn't have real clear-cut data on that. So we used time with the city. For most people, it's the same. They were hired in the job they're in now, and it's the same. In some departments where there's promotions, typically find this in public safety, in some areas where there's promotions or transfers moving around, then it's a little, ideally we'd like time and job to base that on. So I should say that, once we look at this and you continue to look at this, blind applications formula is probably not advisable. So you almost have to go through it person by person. Does this formula make sense or not? And so if you have 2 people in the same job, one was promoted yesterday and one's been doing it for 10 years, and this formula puts them at the same place, maybe that's not quite right. So maybe you need to move one a little bit further along or not move the one as far or something like that. All right. So what is the results of this kind of get to the cost impact? There were 60 employees who were, the closest step to the current rate of pay, but not less, was step one. The median increase was $4,400, almost $4,500 to get these people to step one. As I mentioned, we had people on the average were 10% below market, but some were even further below than that. 91 employees were placed in steps 2 to 13 for their job. Median increase to do that was $814. So you're spending a lot of money trying to get people to the step one. As I mentioned, a lot of folks were kind of below here, right? And then as far as this general increase, everybody would move one step to 3%. That on the average is $1,253. There are 7 people who are going into the top step, and our recommendation and kind of best practice in that case is instead of freezing their pay totally, you wouldn't increment their pay rate to further compound the fact that they're highly paid and maybe by some notion maybe overpaid for what they're doing. They would get a lump sum increase or lump sum bonus in lieu of the steps. In this case, it would be a 3% lump sum payment in lieu of an additional step. So 7 employees that felt in that category, but the rest would get a 3% one-step increase. And based on the salary, the service-based adjustments, that chart we showed, there were 71 people that would get, in addition to the other things you've seen, a service-based adjustment to further improve the linkage between time in the city and pay. Average or median increase is $4,700, ranged from half of these increases were between 2,200, call it, and 7,000. So total costs, dollars wise here, the cost to get the people in that initial step one, or the closest step to their current rate of pay, but not less, is $368,000. The one step general increase, everybody moves one step except for the 7 people. And we added the lump sums in there, that's $213,000. And then the service-based adjustment for those 71 employees to further move people along to try to deal with this pay compression issue was $345,000. Total adjustments, $927,000. What do we get for that? Well, the median salary market index after these adjustments is right at 100%. So overall, our salaries are right at market. Now, the newer folks are going to be, appropriately paid a little bit below the market average, if you will. And some people who have been with the city a long period of time are going to be paid above that. But on the average, we're right at 100%, which doesn't always happen. So that's good. Couple of questions we anticipate. So I guess I've already talked about this. Somebody's pay at top step is step 13. Is their pay frozen? Again, we're recommending lump sum payments in lieu of an increase for those folks eventually. And we recommend that these pay structure, the pay steps, and be reviewed periodically. Probably every other year. I have some clients that do it every year, but probably every other year is adequate. And you have to make an assessment of the market and maybe adjust the pay steps some percentage to keep pace with the market. Prior to 2019, cost of living, go to the next slide, I guess. Cost of living and cost of labor were moving pretty much lockstep, about 3%. It would make sense to kind of periodically adjust the pay structure, the pay steps somewhere around 2 to 3% on an annual basis just to keep up. Right now, of course, with the increased CPI numbers you're reading in the newspaper, it's kind of up in the air as far as what people are doing. We've always told our our clients that they should track the cost of labor, not necessarily the cost of living. Like I said, they were pretty much lockstep up until recently. When we had 13% inflation in 1980, whenever it was. Nobody had 13% pay increase budgets. They did not move their steps 13%. We had like 7 or 8% budgets, maybe half, a little bit more than half of what the CPI number was. So employers are not going to typically match CPI. It's just not a sustainable practice. So what we're seeing for the first time is how employers are responding to the cost of living number of 7 or 8, whatever number you want to pull out and look at. So I think right now there's a bit of a maybe a slight overreaction to CPI, but it's hard to sort out what's what, because even at, as I mentioned, everybody's having a tough time filling almost any job. Especially troublesome are groundskeepers and laborers and heavy equipment operators, sanitation drivers, but it's accountants, it's public works, utilities workers, and water plant operators. It's tough. My clients will tell me it's tough to hire people for any job. So a lot of what we're seeing, I think, is response not only to the CPI, but also just the fact that we have to be able to. We have to have people to run our ambulances or staff the swimming pool or run the water plant or provide public safety, law enforcement, EMS, fire, whatever. So as I mentioned, it's kind of a moving target right now. But we're seeing out there, I bet in Middle Tennessee, the average salary adjustment is probably going to be around 6%. I'm talking Nashville metro area. Now you're a little bit further removed, so it might not be, that might not be a direct comparison, but this stuff typically filters out. And I know in the case of law enforcement, it's almost a regional statewide for market for police officers. So you can't disregard what's going on in Knox County or Hamilton or Davidson or Shelby. But anyway, so we're suggesting that cost of living, you really need to track the cost of labor, adjust the pay scales periodically. And there's you don't have to hire us to do this. There's data published every year from the big consulting houses on how employers are moving their pay structures and what their pay increase budgets are. That's usually available in the newspapers or HR journals, and Libby would have access to that information. So, but we do have clients that ask me periodically to Steve, take a snapshot of 20 jobs, do the same comparisons. Where do our step sixes compare to the market now? And tell us how much we need to move our staff to be competitive. Anything, I guess that's any questions from you folks?
I have another question.
Yes.
Can we go back to the choices for the benchmarks and explain, I guess, why it would be important to include Murfreesboro or Cookeville in these numbers?
So again, some of those, especially in the case of law enforcement, Murfreesboro, I would consider a direct labor market competitor. And they're out recruiting certified officers because they can't, maybe the pool for non-certified trainees has shrunk dramatically. So they're saying, hey, let's see if we can steal already trained certified officers from our outlying communities. And that's probably includes you folks. So especially in the case of law enforcement, I think having Murfreesboro, Rutherford County is very appropriate. It's not that far. Some people would be willing to make that commute, depending on where they live in Murfreesboro. Same thing with water plant operators, heavy equipment operators, any jobs that require some levels of skill. CDL drivers is another headache everybody's dealing with the updated CDL requirements that are coming down the road. How are we going to do this? And pay is going to have to, I think, go up to compensate people to go through the training. And yeah, we were having trouble with those people before all this stuff hit. So in charge of attracting heavy equipment operators, those types of workers. So what's happening with the CDL requirements is going to get worse. So I think it's important to include Cookeville and Rutherford and Murfreesboro and some of those just for that reason.
Because
some of the other
location, they are competitors.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you are not Murfreesboro, so I understand from a financial standpoint. You don't have quite the same resources, but I would argue that you can't totally disregard them because in terms of attracting and retaining employees, that's who you're up against. So you don't have to match necessarily, but you kind of have to be in the ballpark to be able to be competitive enough to attract people to come here, or if they're here and stay here. So that's why we include those. It's not all, we're not just benchmarking solely against Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, and it's the others are in there to hopefully represent the taxpayers' viewpoint in terms of what we can afford and matching us with like type communities. Other questions?
Our benefits packages ranked at all in any of this?
Yeah, so in your packet, I think you should have we did do an overview of the benefits package. I'll just hit the highlights here. Probably if you want to turn to page 8, kind of summarizes everything. We looked at health insurance and vacation, sick leave, short-term, long-term disability, and retirement, and compared you to public sector benchmarks as well as data representing the private sector. Overall, your health insurance, employees are asked to pay a little bit more than typical. Deductibles are a little bit higher than typical. So that, but the insurance is pretty solid. Otherwise, it's an 80-20 plan. So we rated that kind of a middle of the road, pretty comparable to what we find in the public sector and the private sector as well. Same thing for dental and vision insurance. Your vacation was a little bit slightly more lucrative, or more generous than the norm. Sick leave pretty much matched typical practice, as did short-term disability. I did just get information from Libby on your long-term disability. We had information that your employees had to pay for that, but it's really provided by the city free of charge. We don't find that very often in the public sector. So I would change that forward probably to a 7. That is a benefit that actually doesn't cost the employer a whole lot, but does provide some peace of mind. And both from the employers, I had a client that had no long-term disability coverage, and I think it was their public works director had a heart attack, had used up all his sick time, and had no income because he couldn't work for almost a year. And what could they do? There's no. So that's a real problem that many public sector employers have, relying solely on accumulated sick leave to cover short-term or long-term disability. It's if employees kind of bank their sick time, you kind of cover the short-term disabilities, but if you have a long-term disability that could go as long as 5 years or even longer, no, it's not going to cover that. So I think I commend the city for providing that long-term disability coverage. I think that's a good move. Retirement is above average here because it's non-contributory. Employees don't pay for health or retirement plan. That's good, kind of above the average. So overall, I'd rate your benefits package a little bit better than average. And so what we do when we take this into account, when we do the salary study, if I grade you an 8 or a 9, would probably suggest to you that, we were targeting the market average. We could maybe get by with targeting below average because your benefits package is so strong. Or we have some clients, the opposite is true, where the benefits package is pretty weak. We see to balance that off, maybe you need to target something above average in the wage and salary market to kind of balance that. But overall, I would say your benefits package is, it's in the ballpark. It's maybe a little bit stronger than we find in some cases, but we still felt it appropriate to target the market average as far as wage and salaries go. It's hard some people ask, well, can you kind of add some dollars and cents in here and add that to the wage? Well, it's hard to do that. Benefits aren't people don't value the benefits the same. Young folks may not value the benefits much at all. People with families, oh yeah, the health insurance is pretty important. So it's hard to So, yeah, so we just look at the overall picture and how does that tell us? Does that inform us how we target the market wage and salaries? And we say, targeting the average is still appropriate. Other questions?
Seems like we had some discussion when you were here before on merit-based raises. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll try to be real quick here. I know you've got some other things on the agenda here. I have worked with public sector organizations in doing pay for performance, merit pay. It's not easy. It represents a pretty big commitment on the part of the organization to define performance criteria. I think the only way it works in my mind is you can't really have a generic evaluation form, one size fits all. It just doesn't work. Police needs to have their criteria. Fire needs to have their criteria. County needs to have theirs. Utilities needs to have theirs. Each job family also almost has to have a set of defined performance criteria. Some cases you have some things that are measurable, quantifiable. In some cases you don't, but can you observe it? Can you see it if it's there or not? So it's still maybe a little bit subjective, but if it's observable, maybe it's something you can include as a performance criteria. So there's a big requirement to define the expectations. Then you have to train, somehow achieve consistency across raters so that everybody's looking at the same thing in the same way. That's kind of tough, but yeah, there's ways to do it. And then it has to be funded, basically. So if you have merit pay and you decide one year, oh, there's no merit pool, you don't have merit pay anymore. So one of the challenges in the public sector is you almost have to consider the merit pool like the late bill. It's there. We're going to do this. We've committed to it, and it's in the budget. It's kind of at the top. It's not at the bottom. So and that's hard for many organizations in the public sector to do. So it's a challenge. Doable. I guess my question is, why do you want to do that? In the private sector, we would say, oh, what are we trying to improve? Is it sales per square foot? Is it shrink? Are we trying to reduce, shrinkage in the retail world? Is it in the manufacturing? You're trying to reduce cost per widget? Is it, what are we trying to improve? In the public sector, I guess my first question, what part of city government performance are you trying to improve? What do you want to see that's better? And if you can come up with some of those things, well, okay, then we can figure out how everybody else contributes to achieving those goals and define these criteria, move it forward. But it's a big commitment. A couple of years, maybe 3 years before you really get it right. It's a tough thing to do. But we've, part of our proposal was to work with Libby to kind of come up with, to help facilitate that process. That'd be kind of phase 2 of the project here. And we're, very much willing to help try to figure out how to do that and see where that goes. Other questions? All this kind of makes sense. What we
Just say thank you.
Okay.
I think this is a very objective way to go about this. I think we need to be competitive with Murfreesboro and other towns like that. And I think this is a fair way for us to analyze this. So, I think this is something that will not fall on deaf ears, and look to see how we can implement this. I know department heads have been, going through their budget process, and hopefully they're starting with their employees and then looking at projects and equipment needs and putting the employees at the top of the list.
I should mention, kind of related to the notion of benchmarks, for department heads, we do not take the average of all of those public sector benchmarks. We did look at it by population. So the Murfreesboro number, carries the same weight as whatever we got at the bottom. We came up with a statistical model to take into account population. So it would be a salary appropriate for a department head for the city of Minville with a population of around 14,000 people. So I will mention that. So anything else? All right. Well, appreciate do this. And if you have any questions, filter those through Libby, I guess, and I'll try to respond to those if they come up. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 6, public hearings. Item 6A is a public hearing to hear comments on amending the zoning ordinance of McMinnville, Tennessee to rezone 333 Garfield Street from C2 General Commercial to I1 Light Industrial. Hearing no comment on item A, we'll move on to item B, a public hearing to hear comments on amending the zoning ordinance of McMinnville, Tennessee to rezone property located at Hillside Lane from R1 multi-use residential to R4 low-density residential. Hearing no comment on item B, we'll move on to item C, a public hearing to hear comments on amending the zoning ordinance of McMinnville, Tennessee to rezone 307 North Spring Street from R2 medium residential to R5 residential and commercial. I believe that is sufficient time to hear comment for these 3 addresses. We will consider these public hearings closed. Item 7 is petitions. There are none. Item 8 is unfinished business. Item 8A is approval of the treasurer's salary. I believe this was discussed in committee before the full board meeting. And I know the chairman is not here, so Zach and Steve, if you all want to provide context or what came from the committee.
Yeah, Libby talked to us about it. She can speak some more if she wants, but we have a recommendation to the full board.
Okay.
Yes, so what I presented to the committee, and I have additional copies if anybody wants any. What we did was we pulled the data for all of the directors. And we have proposed the amount of 83,554. And what I had shared is what that looks like on today's pay scale, since we haven't adopted a new pay scale. But there's also a note, there's a green column that shows where it would end under the new pay scale. Does anybody want a copy that doesn't have one? You don't. Are there any questions about the data or the recommendation?
Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the recommendation by Human Resources.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Steve Harvey,
Second.
second by Miss Sally Brock. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Sally Rock,
Yes.
Stacy Harvey,
Aye.
Steve Harvey,
Yes.
Rachel Kirby,
Yes.
Zach Sutton,
Aye.
Mayor Testoni.
Aye, motion passes. Item 8B is swearing the oath of treasurer. Samantha, if you'll come up, please. Raise your right hand.
I,
Say your name.
Samantha Moore,
Having been appointed to treasurer of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of the city of McMinnville on April 26, 2022, do hereby solemnly swear to affirm I will support the constitutions, and I'm supposed to be letting you say. So I, state your name.
I, Samantha Moore,
Have been appointed to the treasurer
having been appointed to the treasurer
of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee
for the city of Fayetteville, Tennessee,
by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen
by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen
of the city of McMinnville
of the city of McMinnville
on April 26, 2022.
on April 26, 2022,
Do hereby solemnly swear or affirm
do hereby solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the constitutions
that I will support the constitutions
of the United States of America
of the United States of America
and the state of Tennessee.
and the state of Tennessee.
Further, that I will faithfully
Further, that I will faithfully
and impartially discharge
and impartially discharge
the duties of such office
the duties of such
and
office
execute the laws
and execute the laws
which may be required
which may be required
by the Charter of Ordinance
by the Charter of Ordinances
of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee,
of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
skill,
skill,
and understanding.
and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Get a little carried away there. The next item on the agenda is item 10, resolutions. There are none. Item 11 is ordinances. Item 11A is ordinance number 1832, an ordinance of the city of McMinnville to amend Chapter 5 of Title 14 of the official zoning code of the city of McMinnville, which is the official zoning code of the city, to add a provision for the land uses of multifamily apartments and commercial / multifamily mixed-use buildings in R5 as a special exception, and to set the date that this ordinance shall become effective. This is the first reading.
So thank you, Mayor. This concept came to us from a development request that's actually listed as ordinance D. But what in reviewing our land uses, what we realized is that in the R5 district, you can do some limited commercial, but you actually can't do limited commercial on the first floor and then residential on the second floor. That option is available today only in the C1 district downtown, but we do have a few properties that are zoned R5 that might desire that. One of those is the one that that is rezoning a D. But we discussed this in the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended this unanimously. One of the reasons that's for the commercial multifamily mixed use building. Now for the multifamily apartments, what we found is that it was odd that in R2 you could do a multifamily, but in an R5 you could not. So we felt that was a gap in the zoning ordinance. So again, we had some discussion on this, and it was a unanimous recommendation by the Planning Commission to bring this forward to you. Any follow-up questions?
I'll entertain a motion to approve the ordinance.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stacy Harvey,
Second.
second by Mr. Steve Harvey. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Stacy Harvey,
Aye.
Steve Harvey,
Yes.
Sally Brock,
Yes.
Rachel Kirby,
Yes.
Zach Sutton,
Aye.
Mayor Testoni.
Aye, motion passes. Item 11B is ordinance number 1833, an ordinance of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee, to change the zoning classification of a property located at 333 Garfield Street from C2 General Commercial to I1 Light Industrial, and to express the time for this ordinance to become effective. This is the first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's helpful for these rezonings to look at the map that we provided in the packet. Sometimes people will look to the actual ordinance, but I think it's helpful if you flip to the actual map here that it'll say zoning map 333 Garfield Street in the top left-hand corner. The applicant here is tonight, Mr. Keith Bolden. He does not currently own the property, but he's looking to purchase the property he's requesting or hoping to do a climate-controlled self-storage facility. To do that, he would need to rezone to I-1. And looking at, from staff perspective and looking at this, which we made our recommendation, was that this area was very industrial in character. So the area that you see that is in red is C2, is general commercial. However, in looking back at past maps, we found that at one time, these properties were actually zoned industrial. And again, the character of the area is very industrial. So to switch this to I-1 with I-1 across the street seemed like a very reasonable request. Again, we recommended it as staff. The Planning Commission then unanimously recommended it towards you. As I said, the applicant's here, and if you would like, you can add any words.
I'll answer any questions.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
I just want to clarify what you said. So,
Mhm.
over there where your existing stuff is, Keith, there on the side, that's C2 now. And I believe David said it was I-1.
It was at one time.
Okay, previously, it was previously I-1.
That's correct. Today it is currently C2. We're not exactly sure when that zone change occurred, but it was years ago, probably, I don't even want to guess, but it's been 30, 40 years, literally. And so why that's important, I think, is that yes, on the map, it says C2, but if you actually go and look at the neighboring properties, it feels like industrial because at one time it actually was industrial. So the uses around it are industrial. So the use that he's proposing is very compatible with the neighboring properties. So
we have no idea how
that
got changed.
I don't know for sure, but what I will say is we have comprehensive maps that we can look at in our office that show the history of this. And it is easier to rezone properties when you're doing a complete rezoning of the city than an individual rezoning of property. My guess is that at some point there was a complete rezoning of city properties and that was changed as part of it. So it wasn't actually a single rezoning ordinance that we can point to. There's a little bit less legal steps that you have to take in that case. So it appears to me that that is what occurred, but I cannot independently verify that.
But you have to have I-1 to have storage facilities.
In this location, yes, you have to have I-1 to have storage facilities. You can have it if you are on what we call a collector street or higher. Garfield Street is not a collector street. Those are set by the Tennessee Transportation, TDOT, and those are based on the road counts that's on the street. So there are some locations that if you are on what we call a major collector or higher street, then you can do that in C2, but this was not one of those streets. So the applicant here had to rezone.
Is this where the feed store was or the appliance store? That's that building?
Yes.
Okay.
And you know what, and of course, we're working on the building across the street. When we get through with it, our goal is to remodel this one inside and out as well to make it not be an eyesore that it is that. And has been. So.
Any further questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stacy Harvey,
Second.
second by Ms. Rachel Kirby. We'll call for the vote.
Stacy Harvey,
Aye.
Rachel Kirby,
Yes.
Sally Brock,
Yes.
Steve Harvey,
Yes.
Zach Sutton.
Aye.
And Justin.
Aye, motion passes. Item 11C is ordinance number 1834, an ordinance of the city of McMinnville to change the zoning classification of a property located on Hillside Lane from R1 low density residential to R4 multi-use residential. To express the time that this ordinance become effective, this is the first reading.
Sure. So the applicants again are here as well, and after I speak, they're welcome to add anything. The applicant came forward to us and stated that they were looking to get a permit to put a manufactured home on the back of their property. This property is currently what we call split zone. So the front side of the property is R4, but the back side of the property is R1. With the neighboring properties being R4 and a large portion already being R4, when we as staff felt that it would make sense to recommend to the planning commission that it extend and be the complete parcel be R4. Generally speaking, internally as staff, we have a policy that we don't like to see these split zoned lots. It only creates confusion. It's hard to tell exactly where they start, where they end. And so for those reasons, and also the applicant telling us that their understanding originally was that they thought that the whole parcel was zoned R4. Those together, we made a staff recommendation to the planning commission to recommend this rezoning. The planning commission agreed unanimously and recommended that to you today.
If I voted for that, I either wasn't there, I don't remember, but it seems like to me that all of these are R1, almost all the way around, except for that one tiny little piece of property that is going through an R4. So again, I always have a problem. I think R1 ought to be protected, and I would not be for this in this instant. It is completely surrounded. If they put a manufactured home on that lot, it is going to be completely surrounded by their homes that are, you know, with the R1 specifications. I just can't do that.
So is there any historical context there about how that lot, I don't recall that from the planning commission, how it was split?
We did not find any, again, the applicant came in and said to us, you know, we're looking to do a permit here. And they were actually very surprised when they found out that the map indicated that only a portion of it was R4 and the back was R1. You know, our thinking is that the neighboring property, which they also own, is also R4. So that was the discussion at the planning commission. I don't remember if Mrs. Kirby was actually present during that meeting. I would have to go back and look at
I
the.
may have been late, but that's also going to put those R1s in danger of becoming R4s.
Thing that bothers me is I drove down Hillside. From the front, it looks harmless enough. And then you follow all the way around and get back onto Cadillac Lane. You come up the backside where all the houses are, and you're looking at this property, and this manufactured home will literally be in the backyard of all these houses right there on Cadillac Lane. And I hate to say no to this, but if I lived in one of those houses, I think my question would be, why do we have zoning if we're not gonna, if we're gonna change it, you know, for whatever reason.
I will say that the placard has been out on Hillside Lane. We have not received any negative comments from the neighbors. Maybe you guys have heard differently, but we in our office have not.
I have not either.
I mean, I've seen the placard down on Garfield too. How many of our citizens actually understand what those changes are?
So let me tell you, they'll absolutely come.
Oh, yeah.
I'm living proof of that. They'll absolutely, if there's a problem, they'll come. Right, Nolan?
That's correct.
That's correct. Whether they're invited or not, they're gonna come.
I mean, at the very least, I feel like maybe a little bit more direct and, information for those neighbors. I mean, if all those neighbors on that street consent, that, then maybe it's a different conversation, the backdoor neighbors, but
I don't really, how do we treat this parcel any different than we've treated any other parcel? We put the placard out. If there's not enough interest in with the neighbors, then who are we to decide what's best for their neighborhood? If they have an opportunity to come and comment, wouldn't we expect them to do their duty? I don't think the placard is the only thing that we consider when we're considering changes on them. It's one of them. But it doesn't make a difference if a lot of people show up.
Right.
But if they, just because they don't show up doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to vote to approve whatever zoning change it is.
I mean, I think that's our duty, and that's our role, is to safeguard the zoning and the citizens that are in this R1, whether they're here or not. I mean, maybe they're out of town, maybe they don't care, maybe they didn't see it, maybe they're sick, maybe they don't understand. But I think that's not, whether they come forward or not, we represent them to protect them and their interest in their property that they paid for.
Well, I think conversely, we have a duty to the landowner that's here as well. And
Yes,
we have an opportunity for affected neighbors to comment. We put notices in, I'm sure this was public notice in the newspaper as well, right?
Sure.
So we've got a placard on the site where all the neighbors driving back and forth, mom and dad, brother, sister, they're all going to say, hey, what's going on over there? So there's two methods that we've attempted to get input on this. Where's the threshold? Where's the do we have to go over there and knock on everybody's door?
no, I think it's
Do we
here.
put stuff in their mailbox? What's the
No.
threshold? If
have we had a
if
motion
notice
and a
it,
second on this topic?
Not yet.
The people on Cadillac Lane may never drive down Hillside. That's where the placard is. I mean, these people that live on Cadillac Lane, they may not pull down there by where the front of the property is on Hillside. And I mean, again, I just don't think that's the only thing that we go by. Definitely makes a difference.
I could concur with Steve's point. I think the placard on the hillside, why would you drive down there if you're living on the other side of the property?
So what I would say as a policy, if we're serious about being concerned that adequate notice is not being given out, although it is not legally required, there are states that actually do legally require adjoining property owners to be directly mailed. I would say that moving forward, based on the comments that I've heard, we may consider doing that because can I sit before you and tell you directly what each neighbor says? No, I can't. But that is a means that it's a small cost that would be implemented to do that. Again, that doesn't solve the immediate situation of the rezoning, but it is something that we could create as a policy. Again, that isn't state law in Tennessee by my understanding, but there are states that do have that as a state law.
I think that's an excellent thing to do.
But that's a separate issue. So
That is a separate
we
issue.
would have to table this and bring that through committee back to the board. So
Yeah, and Mr. Stacey Harvey is correct. That would be moving forward, not on this.
I don't know why we can't do that on this. I make the motion that we table this at this time and defer it to the next meeting. Give us the opportunity to send direct property owners a notice of this ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, and it looks like there would be just 5 in this case. So that wouldn't be that large of a mail out to do. I would say that if we were going to do that for consistency purposes, that we would put some type of policy in place for all properties so that we're not just doing it for this one property, that we're doing it for rezonings citywide.
We have a motion to defer. Do I have a second in that regard?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Item 11D is ordinance number 1835, an ordinance of the city of McMinnville, Tennessee to change the zoning classification of a property located at 307 North Spring Street from R2 Medium Residential District to R5 Residential Commercial District, and to express the time for this ordinance to become effective. This is the first reading. And as I recall from the meeting today, there's been an update regarding
Yes.
this property.
Yes. And one thing I didn't get an opportunity on the last, did the property owner on the last property, did you want to speak on this, or do you want to?
No, the only thing I would add is that between where the lot is at
Mhm.
and Cadillac Lane, there's a 200-foot fence all the way down the back,
Mhm.
which separates. As a matter of fact, when we bought the property, we sold the places where the houses are on Cadillac Lane.
Mhm. Okay.
So at the back lot, the back property line of all those homes on Cadillac Lane, there's a fence behind there, is what you're saying?
Yes, there is.
All right.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to give them the opportunity to speak on that. Moving forward on the next item, there has been an update on this. We also briefly discussed this in the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission during their during the last week of March recommended this for approval to change the land use from R2 to R5. At the time of that meeting, Mr. Chastain asked me what the condition of that building was. At the time, we had done an inspection. It was in, to our best knowledge, in shape that could be rehabbed. We have since had two subsequent inspections of that property. The second inspection of that property showed some serious concerns. Basically, the back wall has collapsed for the most of the back wall, which creates a situation where the upper floor is unstable. And we also have some concerns down below as well. Our interim inspector, who is a master code professional, has tons of experience, has informed us that through in writing that this structure is potentially may potentially collapse. For that reason, I've gotten with our Public Works Director, and he has had Public Works barricade that off the sidewalk. We have put yellow tape around it to mark the danger that exists. We are still moving forward with the rezoning on this. The thought being that Spring Street is starting to get a lot of requests for R5 small commercial uses. And we see it becoming similar to what's on College Street today. So we think that the rezoning still makes sense, but I do want to make sure that everyone understands the situation with the building at that property. The owner is here tonight. I have told him verbally and by email that we will be sending out a demolition letter. He does have the option to appeal for that. That would come to our Board of Building Appeals, which is the same staff as the same membership as our Board of Zoning Appeals. That will be late this month. So that is a substantial development that has occurred since the Planning Commission's recommendation. We did not have a quorum today with the Planning Commission, but the members that were there discussed it, and they felt unanimously of those people who were there that it still made sense to move forward with the rezoning. So I know that's a lot, and it's a complex moving situation. So are there any questions about that?
I just want to clarify something, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
The condition of the building has no bearing on the zoning. That's an aside to the zoning.
That is correct. The zoning is not attached to the quality of the building. There were multiple reasons given for the rezoning. One of those was that the property owner was looking on the current structure to put commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor. That may not be possible now with the way that the building is currently in. However, moving forward, the planning commission and we as staff, it makes sense for Spring Street as our downtown develops more. And we're getting to a point where we've got maybe 3 or 4 office spaces that are left. But when that happens and we're maxed out, we're going to see even more demand on Spring Street. It's going to become similar to what we have on College Street today, which is small attorney offices, small professional offices. So we see that coming. We've already got one use in an R2, which arguably probably should be R5 today. And we've got a couple of other things that are moving in that direction. So we think it makes sense for this street to move to R5 with the amount of R5 that is around it.
I know you probably already said it. Can you give us a quick rundown of R5 again and what's
Sure.
allowed?
So R5 is what we call residential commercial. It provides for some very limited commercial. Probably the most heightened commercial that can be allowed is a small scale grocery store. One thing I should mention on this property itself is that directly catty corner to it is a church property. It is within the 300 feet door-to-door requirement. Therefore, this property could not in any way, shape, or form sell alcohol. That was a question that we had in the Planning Commission. And so the other uses are like an office, again, a retail, well, not a retail, I'm sorry, a realty business, some small scale coming and going, but nothing that is a large scale retail enterprise or restaurant that would require a large amount of parking or traffic. And the owner is here tonight if you'd like to speak on the rezoning.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Stacy Harvey, second by Mr. Steve Harvey. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Stacy Harvey,
Aye.
Steve Harvey,
Yes.
Sammy Rock,
Yes.
Rachel Kirby.
Yes.
Zach Sutton.
Aye.
Mayor Testimony.
Aye, motion passes. Item 12 is departmental reports. We have several department heads here this evening. If anyone wishes to address the board, please step to the podium.
I got a couple of things I want to say to y'all. Saturday, I'm gonna recognize the B shift of our fire department. They went out with Red Cross to do the sound alarm program. And they put in 63 smoke alarms up South House, North House, them apartments, building. And I think that was really good on that part of helping out. They tried to do it 2 years ago. COVID hit, we couldn't get it done, all that, so we finally, and they gonna come back again and hope to help them again and get more out in the housing and apartments. And second, I want to say that, like Miss Lee say, our guys work hard. They go out every day on calls. Don't know, maybe the last call they go on. But we got problem keeping guys. They like you say, they would come here, get trained. 3 years from now, they leave, go somewhere else for more money. So I would like for y'all to look at it awful hard and kind of help the department out to keep them here. Because we got some good firefighters down there, and I hate to lose them. We done lost a few, and I'll give anything out back. But saying that, I just wish y'all would think on it real hard and try to help us, police and everybody else out in the city on this.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chief.
I would say kind of what the chief said too. I do hope y'all think real hard about it because we are having hard times to hire people, heavy equipment operators especially. The state, they have just passed a thing that CDL drivers, February the 7th, you kind of got to go to a school to be certified. I'm trying to get somebody in the city certified to teach them and everything. So we do have a hard time, I'm sure the water too, having a hard time keeping people in everything. And I'd like, David's got a little bit to say about the volunteer that y'all approved or whatever to let come out and work with animal control.
It is the program that I talked to you about a couple of months ago. It's moved very good. This last week, we placed 8 dogs that went to Georgia. We had 5 that went to Connecticut. One of them that went to Connecticut the next day was adopted. It's already laying on a couch in somebody's house. I just got a picture of that today. But the program's working good. It's doing a lot of help for us getting these animals out. Right now, I've got 2 volunteers, and I don't plan on having over 3 at the most. One of them has Crossroads Shelter Aid. Excuse me, Crossroads Shelter Aid. She has a lot of contacts. The other one she's a certified vet tech. She comes in and helps us by pulling blood samples and everything to do tests. And it's the only thing we're out is just the supplies to do this with. We don't have to carry them to the vet because anything that goes out has to have these tests done. The only thing that we have to do is to get the health certificate from to go across the state line. The vet does have to do that. But when we've got all this other stuff already done, it's made a big difference on how quick that's accomplished. And rescues that's out are starting to see what we're doing, and they're starting to show a lot of interest in the dogs that we've got. So I just wanted to get everybody up to speed and what we've been able to accomplish tonight.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Good evening. I do want to tell you, we did hire somebody. He started yesterday. His name's Tristan Shirley. He's right out of the military, but we will have to send him to the academy. So we're happy about that. And I do want to let everyone know, I really appreciate the effort in listening to this compensation study, because it is something very important. I think safety it should be is very high priority, for our community. I mean, fire, police, all of us. When people move into this community, they want to look at the numbers of the crime and all that stuff. And a lot of people don't realize if it doesn't affect them, they don't know it's happening, but we see it every day. And hope that we do make it through the day. I mean, because this is a crazy world we all live in. I mean, it's just part of it. And there are those that are fortunate that doesn't have to deal with that, but we do it every day. And it is very hard to keep people to work into this profession, because it is, I mean, you very seldom get a pat on the back, and it's difficult, and we can't unsee all the things that we see, daily. It's something we live with and we take personally, if people we don't even know, but then turn around and get chewed out by them, for something. We're just writing a ticket, to try to help slow somebody down, so there's not bad accidents. And, I really do hope this goes through, because, I mean, it is hard, because people, they'll drive somewhere else, for the pay. And I want to continue to keep our community safe. And it is a big deal, people coming to move in here, because that's what they'll ask about, which crime rate is. And when we're short, we can't be everywhere and it's really difficult. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to mention real quick a few things. This Saturday at the Milner, we have the McMinnville Special Games in our main arena in the south balcony from 10 to 3. So we're excited about that. They wanted to move it inside this year, so it's going to be in our arena. So we've been working on the setup for that. It's going to be great. Also this Saturday at the Park Theater, we have Canon Arts Dance Studio Spring Recital back to Broadway at 7 p.m. So want to catch a show, we've got that going on. And then before our next meeting, we'll have a big weekend, May 21st. We've got the Color Run. Generation is putting that on, Generations in the back parking lot. The Spartan Race at the Milner Center from 9 to 3, which will be going on inside the building. And then we're going to have a skate day at the skate park from 12 to 4. So big time at the complex. So.
And Dougstone on the 20th.
And Dougstone on the 20th. That's right. That's right. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Purtle, you have anything, Mr. Main?
I have one thing. We will be meeting with Matthew Kate with the Tennessee Transportation Assistance Program on Thursday. He's the one that's going to review the Spring and Donald Street intersection as well as the West Main Post and Clark intersection. So more to come on that soon. And Frank has ordered
So tired flashing light.
yeah, still.
It should be coming in this week, I think.
So
They said about 3 to 4 weeks whenever I ordered it. It's been a little over 2. So
that's all I have.
Thank you. Next item is announcements. Does any member of the board have any announcements?
A question for our administrator. Hearing the compensation study, is there any type of, for the audience was, is there a next step? Can you outline how the board might go about taking that into consideration?
Yeah, so from here, you would need to schedule a finance committee meeting to review the proposal and to propose that to the full board to make it happen. So I think we will include those discussions as we talk about the budget this coming week or this week. So yeah, that's the next step. Take it to the finance committee.
Hearing nothing else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
No, I actually thought about just making that statement, just so everyone here knew what to expect at the next step. I didn't do anything, but I think it's too.
Well, I didn't write down.
Yeah, theory, it's like, well, it should make a difference.
Hi, Samantha.
It sure does.